We celebrate Mother's Day because of two extraordinary American women. One, a mother, and one who never had children of her own, but changed the course of American history forever. I'm Jenna, and this is Smarter News. Well, I'll be honest. Today, I had a whole plan for our weekly Anything But Politics segment. This is where we take a deep breath, take a break from the politics that is so pervasive in our news. And I was going to take a little time to talk about Mother's Day. I had a whole segment prepared that involved flowers, a personal reflection. And as per usual, as a mother, I one, ran out of time, and two, was interrupted by somebody. And that somebody is a new pope. So we're going to have to address that because we do have breaking news and historic news at that, with a American pope selected for the very first time in the 2000-year history of the Catholic Church. So I don't want to ignore that, but I also don't want to get too pushed off what I was planning to talk to you a little bit about. And there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be talking about Cardinal Robert Prevost, who is now Pope Leo, and perhaps some about his past, how this may apply to policies in the future of the church. We're gonna get a lot of analysis on that. I found myself thinking about the Pope in this way. I thought to myself, you know what? The Pope would not exist without his mother. It's Mother's Day weekend. What about the mother of the Pope? What about the backstory here? There has to be an interesting backstory about the Pope's family. So I found a really incredible article, all credit to the Chicago Sun-Times, that wrote up a very in-depth piece about Cardinal Prevost and his history, thinking all along that this would be very much a long shot because it's thought that superpowers like the United States that have deep political divisions are likely not the place where the next pope was going to come from. I mean, that was just sort of one school of thought. One of the reasons why an American pope wasn't necessarily at the top of the list is the potential next pope. But this proves you got to be prepared for anything. So this article has now become even more relevant. And again, I'll put it in the show notes for you because it really paints a very remarkable picture of this American family. The Pope's father was a lifelong educator. He also served in the Navy during World War II, so he was a veteran. His mother, Mildred, was a librarian. She had several sons, and she worked as a librarian, but she graduated from college at the age of 34 and went on to actually get her master's in education 2 years later. So in the 1940s, she's married, having babies, getting her college degree, going on and getting her master's in education. She studied library science. So her full name, Mildred Martinez, and she went by Millie. And in her obituary, she is credited along with her husband for starting the library in the local church and school that her children and her family attended. And I'm going to read a little bit from this article. St. Mary's parishioners remember her as the sweet Millie, one of those ladies who keeps a Catholic parish running, a constant presence at the school. She was in the Altar and Rosary Society, at one point its president. With a memorable voice, she sang in the church's choir. This is a quote. She was one of the ladies that we called church ladies, says Marianne Angarola, 69, who graduated with the future cardinal. They went to mass on a daily basis. They cleaned the altars, the church, the sacristy. She was involved in everything, including the fundraising activities. I don't ever remember seeing her wear pants, which, I totally understand, by the way, as someone who likes to wear a dress or two. So this was a description of sweet Millie in the church. Her husband, Lou, was described as very staunch, says one of the former parishioners, that he was always there for Millie, but he stayed in the background because she was doing things at the parish. And they describe a family that regularly attended mass. And by the way, the now Pope was described as being a little bit different than the other boys. Some of the students said that they all had aspirations, perhaps, of doing something that involved the church. But with him particularly, it seemed like he was on a path to something perhaps greater. Although one described getting poked in the back of the head by a pencil that he held when he got out of line. So there was a sense of humor there. So I'll leave that story to be told another time. But the mother of the current pope was a woman who sought education, studied library science, advocated for a library to be part of her parish, worked as part of her parish. And by the way, she had two sisters who were nuns. So, many of us as mothers were thinking about, well, what would the future look like for my children? And I don't know. I mean, I don't think it's ever crossed my mind that that one of my sons could be a pope someday. But you never know what they could achieve in their lives. And so, as I'm thinking about the new pope, I'm also thinking about his family background, especially this weekend. I'm thinking about his mother, Millie, who has now passed on, and her son is assuming the highest position in the Catholic Church. So, just a little bit of history there for you, maybe something a little bit different than some of the analysis, but something to think about, because in a church history where there is no woman pope, there also would be no pope without a woman. Oh, certainly without a mother. So we'll make that connection there. Let's talk a little bit about Mother's Day stateside. This is one of the most fascinating stories that I learned actually as part of Smarter News. You have inspired me so much to look into American history and to question some of the things that sort of just wash over us on a regular basis. Mother's Day, what kind of history can Mother's Day have? It's pretty obvious, right? We're going to celebrate the moms. Like, this is a very clear holiday. But the backstory to this holiday is one that has sat with me for so many years now that I've researched it, and each year uncover something, a little something different about it. And what I love most about this story regarding Mother's Day is that it actually involves trying to soothe divided families and political divisions and celebrating the special role of a mother in that. So let me take you back to the 1850s, late 1850s. There was a woman by the name Anne Jarvis. And one of the things she did is she taught health and sanitation to these communities in Appalachia, so poor communities. And that was one of the roles that she took. She also, though, quickly changed that role, and it evolved somewhat because suddenly we find ourselves in the middle of the Civil War. And especially in that part of the country, you could have families fighting families, literally cousins fighting cousins, extended families fighting families, because of those that associated with the North or the Union and those that associated with the South or the Confederacy. So we find ourselves in this time of, incredible political division. What do you do to try to smooth that over? And one of the things that Anne Jarvis did is she tried to promote these mother friendship days as a way of bringing families back together that were divided amongst the staunchest lines possible. So her daughter, Anna, is watching Anne do this, and she's watching in great admiration. And she remembers that her mom at one time expressed a wish that the mothers would be recognized for their role in communities. And this stuck with Anna. And she decided that she was going to advocate officially for Mother's Day. And it was her work, her effort to get Mother's Day to become an official holiday. It eventually was in their home state of West Virginia, but she did so much work in spreading the news about a Mother's Day that eventually Congress makes it officially a holiday. And in 1914, Woodrow Wilson signs it into law. Mother's Day actually came first before Father's Day. There was a daughter inspired by what she heard about Mother's Day way across the country. And she decided, wait a minute, we should have a Father's Day too. So Mother's Day was really the lead. And if you look at the proclamation from President Wilson, what's interesting about it, when I think about Mother's Day, I think about floral, I think about flowers, I think about very feminine things. One of the things he says in the proclamation is that the American flag should be displayed all over homes and government buildings as part of this holiday to reflect the importance of the mother in America, in our country. So we don't see that much, too much today, but perhaps it's a tradition that we could bring back. Anna Jarvis thought that the carnation, which was her mother's favorite flower, should be associated with Mother's Day over any other flower. Often we see, roses or different bouquets. But very quickly after Mother's Day came into effect, there's a twist to this story, and it's one that gives us a lot of pause. It quickly became a commercial holiday where people were making money. There was a commercial opportunity, right? We're going to get gifts and decorations for Mother's Day. And it became an economic activity along with a day that we're supposed to recognize the role of a mother in the country. Anna Jarvis was extremely bothered by this. And the same passion that led her to develop the day and to really advocate for the day was then reversed, where she asked actually for the day to be rescinded. She did not like this commercialization. In fact, she ordered a Mother's Day salad at a friend's restaurant, like Tea Room, only to take the salad and dump it upside down on the ground because it was a Mother's Day salad. And she did not want the commercialization of the holiday as much as it was at the time. So imagine what she would think about now. It's actually a little bit of a sad story because it seems that Anna, in many ways, unraveled. She was in some poor health. She wound up in a sanitarium where she ended up dying. And that was, we kind of think about that as a mental health institution or a convalescence center where she spent her final years. But up until the end, she was extremely upset about the attention of the day being about gifts and not necessarily about honoring the mother. And so I'll leave us with that because it is something to think about. There's a lot of activity around Mother's Day. What are you going to do? What are you going to get? What are some of the gifts? And really it started with a mother that was trying to be a force for good in her community and honoring the role of so many mothers to do just the same by the way that they bring different families together. Just what an incredible story. As I was thinking about motherhood and just a little personal reflection, I thought, oh, it'd be so great. What are the 3 things that I've learned about motherhood as an entrepreneur? I'm a mother of 3. I have children that are 10, just turned 9 and 5. And I wish I had these huge, big, profound words of wisdom. And I think one of the things about motherhood is it's a lesson in humility on a regular basis. And I remember thinking to myself when I started Smart News, because my children were very young, they were 2, almost 3, turning 1. And so I really built Smarter News working in the early mornings, late in the evenings, during nap time. And I thought to myself at the time, wow, this is such a contortionist activity. I'm bending myself into all these strange shapes as I once did as a young journalist, shoving myself into a doorway. I remember doing an interview trying to escape the wind. In the same way, now years later, I'm a mother and I'm trying to figure out how do I build a news platform while also being present for my children. And I found it to be extremely difficult. And I always thought, well, if only when they're potty trained, then this will be easier. When they get to school, only when they get to school, then things will be easier. Or now only if they're all at the same school, then eventually I'll be able to have the agency to really drive hard into this business and pour into it the way that I want to. At times, that some balancing it all, it restricts you. You only have so many hours in the day, and there's only so much you can do, especially if you want to be present with your children. And what I realize is that what I would love to say about motherhood to others is the flexibility about that is required when you're a mother is so much bigger. I can call it being a contortionist. That might have a little bit more of a negative bent. I could say it's really a lesson in flexibility. It's something I didn't really have an understanding or appreciation for until I was actually in this role. And now that my children are older, they are thankfully potty trained. They are, thankfully in school. There are certain things that are much different than what required my attention when they were toddlers. I also see that the sort of attention they need is a lot more present than I was expecting, quite frankly. And so now I find myself adjusting again to try to figure out how do I feed that need as a mother and also feed some of my passion too. And that's a very difficult balance to maintain. And there's no silver bullet to that. I have some deeper thoughts on it that I have written into a book proposal, if you want to know a little bit of a secret. And I'm excited to develop that further because I think we're missing part of the story here when it comes to modern motherhood. I think we're missing part of the story. And I realize that because I recognize it in myself. And so taking a journalistic approach to this chapter of my life is something I wish I did a little bit earlier. And I hope to help empower other women to do too. So I'll keep you posted on that project. Again, it's a project that's probably going to be worked on in the early mornings, late evenings, during nap time, which looks much different. If only we could nap. If only we could all nap, then that would be great. So here's what I wish for you on a Mother's Day. Get yourself a nap, a little bit of a nap. If motherhood isn't something that is directly impacting you right now, call your mom. Call your mom. And if you're not at that stage of your life yet, one thing I would say is I wish I appreciated some of the parents that I worked with a little bit more about what they were balancing or dealing with. And especially towards the end of the school year, lended a little bit more of a hand or provided a little bit more grace, because for both fathers and mothers, this is a difficult time of year. And if I was struggling, as I once was, thinking about, will I ever become a mother? Because that's also a piece of this holiday. I would have faith, and I would also take a lesson from the story that I just told, which is there's so many different ways to impact raising this nation. And sometimes it's in the role of a mother, and sometimes it's in a role of somebody different. And I've had many wonderful fairy godmothers in real life that have helped me along the way. So however you're celebrating this weekend, however you're recognizing this holiday, I hope this was helpful to you. And I wish you a very happy Mother's Day. And maybe we can display some American flags, perhaps a few flowers, but also thinking about how we can always work to bring our sometimes divided communities and divided families back together again. I'm so glad you're part of the Smarter News family. And thank you for allowing me to share some of the news and a little bit of a personal reflection with you. I hope you have a great weekend, and we'll see you back here next week on Smarter News. Bye, guys.